Hello and welcome to another episode of Alan Writes. We're working on Lucky Gold, working title, and we're about to meet another person in the story. Right now, I don't know if he's a major player, a minor player, or he's just someone to see our main heroines through a different set of eyes, and we'll see where we go. But Dennis Q heard the jingle of the slots as he strode well before he strode through the casino doors, where the air conditioning blew cool. Apparently that's not how you spell air conditioning. Oh yes. They're cool, and the flashing lights, they flashed. His business suit out of place, and so did his briefcase. Not the least of which because he got a second look from security. To satisfy them, he toward the conference, towards the conference center. He wasn't here to gamble, at least not in that way. All right, see where I've okay, at least not in that way. No, if he was lucky, then millions might trade hands. No, if he was lucky, then millions might trade hands. And if he wasn't, then he might well be out of a job. Those were the breaks. Or at least his. Now, I don't have to say that he's growing up in something. Alright, because, again, when you're writing things out for a first draft, often you're writing for yourself. You're establishing backstory in your mind that you have to put, that you're going to have for the characters. And that's not going to really matter, because eventually you're going to subsume it and you're going to imply it. Like, I say his last name, and he's obviously of mixed ancestry, or at least he's an American. In this case, he's a Chinese American. He said, up without delay. Delays could be fatal. Ask anyone with a heart condition. Packets into plates for the sponsor, arranged tidily by importance. Noest time. By importance. In this case, it was the degree of investment. smaller sums were up front to tease keep the smaller sums were up front to keep the meeting flowing. If things were obviously too pricey, people tended to shut down. Not that this particular sponsor was shy of cash. No, but she was new. And new often meant reticent or bold, depending. Meant cautious. And if she wasn't cautious, well, she could just skip to the packs. Further in. A figure filled the doorway. He looked up, made himself smile. It was just a woman. The smile didn't have to be plastered across his face. He beckoned her inside. A small chuckle for himself. For starting at shadows. Do you ever get used to that? There, if you would, thanks, Daniel said. Outside, the sudden ring-a-ding of a jackpot called out. Do you ever get used to that? Sadly, yes, the woman said as she positioned the water with a little wobble that made him tense. A single spill on the packets would be unfortunate. Strangely, she yelled for him before settling back. She smiled at him. Are you Mr. Shaku? Daniel blinked, finally noting a lack of a name tag on the woman's suit. Plain suit, no real style to it, at least not going to compare with the standards of Vegas. It was something a graduate student might wear. And that fit. We knew about Miss Heather Flowers, young botanist, graduate of Michigan State University, and a sudden player in the world of project financing. All supposedly done by casino winnings. If that was to be believed. That she'd been asked to leave 2 casinos. Casinos in Atlantic City before she'd established herself as something of a whale to be landed supposedly personally he thought it might be, thought she might have acquired an unexpected trust from a rich relation, and was using the casino as a way to buy into the wider world without an introduction. He had only a single picture of her. A university photo that someone had posted on wewentoschooltogether.com. That haggard image didn't do it justice now. It was shining with amusement. Pretty, but not beautiful, but vibrant too. Call me Daniel, Daniel replied and drummed top a minute. Best to play this safe. I take it you are Miss Heather, please. I've had my fill of formality already today. She replied and motioned for him to sit. Hope you didn't mind the subterfuge, such as it was. What, the water? Asked as he sat across from her. The table was a narrow one. He could readily pass things back and forth with a minimum of fuss. No, that's fine. Should have caught it earlier. Some clients stage more elaborate tests, but yours was effective. At least I hope so. I like to see how people treat the help. It tells me a lot about them. Did you waitress through school? Is that a guess? Your grip on the tray suggested professional in practice, but not recently, Daniel said. You wavered a little when you set things down, and I worried you'd spill the vitriol all over the documents. You didn't. She looked at him for a moment. He could almost hear her neurons snap as she unpacked not only the words, the meanings, and the implications. That's very good. A compliment both ways. A nod to your skill and a reminder that we have work to do. 4 for 4. Daniel thought and girded himself for a difficult meeting. It was so much easier to talk to scions well, to dazzle them with possibilities and guide them to the proper conclusion. Sometimes they were educated, sometimes they were cunning, and sometimes they were smart, but rarely were they all three at once. Let alone being in touch with the lives of ordinary people. I'd like to begin to say. Heather reached out, eyes closed, and plucked a packet at random. This one. All right. Daniel remarked, not at all taken aback by that random method. Patrons sometimes use it to exert an illusionary measure of control over the meeting. Usually just mess things up, but he was ready for that. You selected sponge concrete. It's a project born out of the trouble of maintaining roads in extreme conditions, such as the Sahara or Michigan. That drew a smile from him. So, it will deal with heat expansion? That's the idea. Daniel said and launched into the pitch. Ordinary concrete can last for centuries under optimal conditions. The Roman roads are a fine example of this, with portions of the Via Appia laid down in 1312 being in use to this day. This project seeks to replicate the longevity of the Roman building technique, but with an eye toward modern speed and weight limits. The cost savings on road maintenance will recoup the initial costs, the savings on road maintenance. And why isn't it done? How's it done? She asked, raising a pen to take notes on a series of index cards, even though the entire packet was hers to keep. And why isn't it done? Well, Daniel said and prepared to explain what he could before boredom took hold. Even the most attentive of people would let their eyes glaze over before long. The idea is to take a form of modern concrete and change the way it dries, forming a lattice instead of a solid structure. It is believed that with the right structure, instead of forming a lattice instead of forming a lattice. That will better self-support. It is believed that with the right structure, the concrete could breathe with the heat and not suffer damage, reverting to its original form once the temperature event has passed. Naturally, this would be restricted to non-city use, but even so, it would still be extremely useful. Let's see. What's the buy-in? Non-city use? Rural roads, where there is space for the concrete to breathe. In the city, it might upset foundations, crack pipes, and so on. I see. What's the buy-in? 30 million over 10 years. 10 years? That's a commitment. It is, but the project has had funding problems in the past, Daniel explained. Those attached to it don't run a reprise. What happened? I can't go into details. There's a lawsuit involving it. She shrugged at that. If she knew the sums involved in the suit, she might have done otherwise. Just give me the generals then. Was it too many backers and not enough results? More like a catch and kill by certain factions of the construction industry, said, and tried to keep the bitterness out of his voice. It was one thing to deal with industrial espionage where secrets were stolen. It was another to watch someone try and kill a good idea entirely so they could put a few bucks in their pocket. The patent litigation ate up project funds. Will I be funding that? Heather asked and gathered her index cards. No. Will it get in the way of the project? Possibly, Daniel admitted. Because sometimes you had to tell an unpalatable truth when a lie would be poisonous. You apparently believe in full disclosure. The slick salesman thing only works once on people before they get wise, and in this business you always end up seeing the same people over and over. Daniel explained. She seemed rapt with attention. Admittedly, apparently the cynical part of her had not yet ossified ossified in her forebrain. Honesty here is the best policy. You hear the risks. You hear the risks, and you weigh them. I'm getting a better idea of his character. He is a salesman, but he tries to be an honest salesman, which is obviously difficult. He is going to come at you with a little sideways sometimes to try to sell his product. He's here to sell his product, whatever that happens to be. In this case, he's fundraising. But he also knows that a long-term relationship is best, because when you're dealing with people who are moving millions of dollars around, generally you're going to see the same people over and over. You've got to build a relationship. Just like that, she asked and gestured with her index card-filled hand. The cards flew into the air and wafted down onward. She caught 3 of them up almost idly and let the others fall. Maybe she wasn't just apparently those waitressing reflexes had stayed. Just buried deep. Tell me, have the project managers considered a structure that is designed to contract instead of expand? He slowed his work, racking his brain. The answer came quickly. Well, yes, I think there was some talk about that early on, but it is the heat adaptability they worried most, and they abandoned the alternative to focus on what they knew they could do. I was thinking of shrinky dinks, Heather replied out of nowhere. My mother was big on them on those when she was a girl. They're a structure designed to shrink with heat. Shrinky-dinks, I never did anything with those. Neither did I, but I do remember them, said and leaned back in her chair, supremely confident as she set aside the 3 index cards. If I come up with the funding, I'd like the team to look into that as a priority. I have a feeling it might solve a great many problems and perhaps even allow the concrete to be used in cities. You mean laying concrete? You mean laying concrete? You mean laying concrete could contract without shattering pipes or, well, yeah. It wouldn't harass the foundation. It wouldn't pressure the foundations quite so badly. If we had the space to do it. Using the open space for drainage or whatever. Made during cooler times for drainage or whatever. Was an interesting idea. It was an interesting idea. She was certainly smart. Certainly smart. For 30 million, you'd have a great deal of influence, Daniel replied. It was true, to some extent. He didn't know exactly how much that would avail her, and her wild... He scooped up her 3 cards. He scooped up... He scooped up her 3 cards to tidy things up. And made it set them with the others. The words contraction and inversion were written on them. She literally plucked out of the air. That was a little crazy. There are other projects you might want to hear about, assuming that 39 is not your limit, Miss Flowers. I don't know my limits yet. Go ahead and do the rest of your presentation your way. And please, call me Heather. Miss Flowers is what my mother calls me. All right. That's that chapter. Is it a little short? Probably. All right. And that was the extent of the original story that I wrote down. And now we need to go beyond that, as I will do 6 months ago. And then I italicize it to go for the bit. All right, when last we left off, where were we with this? With the backstory. So they know it's they've got the secret door. Six months ago. Her samples clinked softly in her, not her test kit, not her, it's a sample sack in her bandolier in her satchel. As she settled in the tubes. 44. 44. 44 in all. Samples, 44 in all. And each a possible discovery. 44 in all, and each a possible discovery. The glance at the sky found the sun arcing slowly down to sink in the west, and that meant it was nearly time to head back. Or maybe she had time for one last look. Okay, so they're going to be, it's a gang or something. I need to put, where's my cast of characters? Obaran, Dr. David, and the guide, who's still unnamed. I don't want to name him Pedro. Dr. David, archaeology. She heard Obaran call out to the guide, asking where Pedro was going. And Pedro was already halfway across the open, across by the clearing, and toward the jungle edge. He had their water, and their snacks. He had set a quick pace. Are we leaving? Called out to Obaran. I don't know. Maybe. He answered back and ran after their guide. Okay, so Heather grabbed her satchel and slung it. It'd be a long hike out, 6 miles, or what is that in kilometers? Or so, depending on how kilometers translated into that. She had her phone and her GPS and the vehicle, and the expedition SUV wasn't very far away, even without a guide. A shot rang out. She held her breath. She blinked. A crack rang out. A snap. A crack rang out. And stared as a small flock of birds took flight from just from a portion nearby jungle. What was moments later? David scrambled out of the ruin and hurried toward her. What was? Let's ask. Run. Broke into a jog. Whatever. We don't want it. Whatever it is, we don't want it. Okay. They're gonna get pursued. He's gonna get captured. She's gonna escape. He'll be captured. She'll escape. Have to leave her samples behind. The gang pursues into the jungle. After them, she circles around to use her phone in the clearing. Just real briefly. The phone in. Can't run and phone at the same time. He'll try and be captured. Maybe shot. But she'll escape. Okay. There we go. That's good. All right, so we've moved into the purely creative part of things, where it's going to get a whole lot more, I don't know, slow up, and I'll have to reduce a lot of tangles as we go and try to do some research in between things, particularly for the artifact and expeditions and things like that. But that's for another time. I hope you've enjoyed this little romp through the creative territory. Stay safe and take care out there, all right? Thanks.